The Pirates. Her opening attack is three-pronged, a blast of lightning from the sky, a brutal current carried through the muddy ground, and to try and distract from these more subtle techniques, she throws a lightning bolt to his face. He doesn't even bother deflecting and instead redirects all of it to gather in his hand. He flicks it back as a lightning bolt nearly 10 times the size of any one of its three components, and she deflects it into the sky. Another blast is thrown only to be caught in the water he controls to send it spinning back to her. She dodges, but lets out a screech as the dodge means nothing with the attack landing next to her and electrifying the mud and water she's standing in. And now, here is the downside of your storm fetish. There may be a great deal of electricity to direct, but there's just as much water to redirect it, he says, and another blast of lightning comes screaming down, only to strike a small river in the air that carries the power straight towards the lidus that brought it forth. With 4 of her bodies, she catches the power and shapes it into an enormous bright blue spear that she launches right back at Franklin when it refuses to be redirected and evaporates the water nearest to it. His eyes widen and he raises his hands to catch it instead. The sheer force of the storm spear skids him backwards as he begins shifting and churning the energy into a manageable ball. Electricity sheathed by plasma to keep it from being interfered with. Clever. I suppose with 12 schizophrenic minds you might have a decent idea shake out every now and again. Schizophrenic? Do I look schizophrenic to you? She demands, suddenly insulted. Miss Finnell, your species, the Lidus, have synchronized minds in each of the heads, connected through a biological shortwave axiom radio. Any slight differences are supposed to be smoothed out as you sleep, allowing you to express yourself fully. Your minds, on the other hand, are separated and they're just pawns, little malignant tumors that grew out of me. Me, I'm the original! The central torso screams at him before brutally attacking one of the more annoyed-looking side heads. Don't think I can't hear you! You're my slave, hear me! My slave! She screams. Hey, girls! Hold her still and I'll cut the bitch out! Ever wonder what it's like to not be a monster? Franklin offers, and there's a pause. Then the central body starts to laugh. He waits as the laugh goes from astounded to hysterical to maniacal, to just plain overdrawn. The gills on the side of the larger body outright open up and begin letting out huge gouts of air to keep up the laughter which has already gone past the point of parody and into the annoying. I've been too nice already, he notes before blurring forward and then vanishing in a teleport. The laughter is cut off with a scream of pain and shock. He's suddenly there, and a concussive level of strength rocks the lead body. The whole of her being flinches in pain. Interesting, Franklin notes, and then dodges the dozens of reflexive blasts of electricity by teleporting away. He reappears on the main body, crouched down and considering as both cameras zoom in on him. You're a very parasitic piece of work, Jem, he notes, and the infuriated central head turns to him with her now dislocated and no doubt broken jaw hangs loose. Forcing the other parts of your mind out and then bleeding off your fear and pain to them. He's gone as an enormous blast of lightning slams into the main body of the Lidus, and he reappears near the camera. So it's the main head that's the cause of all your madness, a central tumor of cruelty and sadism. The obvious option is to rip it out and force the rest into a healing coma. A reset if I can take the bitch alive. But do I want to? Do I want to take prisoners? He asks himself before vanishing again in front of the massive lance of electrical power. He reappears while pacing his chin in his hand, clearly lost in thought. The next electrical lance crashes into him and shatters as he considers. You know what? I'll just beat you to a pulp, and if you survive, I'll carve out the worst parts and see if I can salvage a person out of your crazy. You couldn't on your best day and my worst! Jem screams at him as another blast of lightning crashes down. Before the light can return to normal, she screams in agony. He's wrestling with the central head and repeatedly ramming a K-bar into her around the chest and waist. The rest of the bodies rush him and he jumps hard, holding the central part by the neck. There's a tearing sound, and he vanishes with the central torso, severed from the rest of the Lidus at the waist. He reappears some distance away with the severed torso screaming and sobbing before he drives the K-bar into her forehead and twisting the blade to ensure that she's good and dead. The rest of the lidus twitches and thrashes as he lets the corpse fall to the ground. He looks up into the rain to let it wash him of the blood from the evisceration he just performed with little more than a combat knife. The central body goes through a twitching session where it's very still, then moves, then is still as its controlling minds seem to go into complete war with one another. Then it goes very, very still, and the remaining heads turn to him at once. "I suppose I should thank you," she says from 11 mouths at once. "I would never have regained myself to—" The knife disappears from Franklin's hand, and the entire lidus skids backwards. 6 different hands holding back the weapon before she straightens herself and waves it at him. "Tisk, tisk, little Tret. We're unified now. That pain, that suffering and terror, it was exquisite. Thank you for sharing it with me. I'll be sure to let entire sectors know the decadent delight of purest agony." The gems state as one, and he only smiles. "Is something funny?" she asks as she works her tail to half slither, half swim through the muddy landscape. "Only that you made this much easier," he notes as she whips out her claws to slam into the mud around him. The filth parts and refuses to touch him despite the rain pouring onto him with ease. "You see, I was worried that only one head was crazy and needed to be put down, so I was worried about how to spare the rest. But if you're all this crazy, well, I don't have to play nice now, do I?" he asks her, and the Gem Collective lean down to leer at him. "You are something special. What do you say to the idea of me tearing off your arms and legs, breaking your pelvis to give us a child, and then eating you alive?" she asks as she smiles wide to reveal mouths full of fangs. "1 down, 11 to go," he replies calmly, and Gem flinches back and then begins to laugh from each of her different selves. Unlike the first round, it dies off quickly as 2 of them hold up the severed stump where the main torso once was. 11? Oh no, we are going to grow 2 more from the stump, I know. Put some hustle in it so you don't bore me to tears." He interrupts the 11 who glare at him before the stump erupts into 2 more bodes, one outright hissing at him, and the other grabs him by the coat and lifts him up. "You impertinent little gah!" she screams in pain as her hands suddenly blacken and char, and he lands on his feet with ease, lightly brushing the small amount of soot off his coat as now the rain sizzles away into steam the moment it touches him. There is a ring in the mud and water where it's simply dry wherever he stands. Entire oceans worth of water are pouring down and he's bone dry. "I am immensely jealous," J3 whispers to his earpiece, and Franklin simply chuckles in response. "I'll teach you the trick later," Franklin whispers to his microphone, too lightly for Gem to catch. "You think you're funny?" Gem demands him in fury. "I think you should keep your hands off the merchandise. It's worth more than your life 1,000 times over. No, wait. Nothing times 1,000 is still nothing. Never mind. Let's just get back to your death." He considers then one of the 13 slams into him with her fists glowing. He skids backwards as the energy refuses to dissipate. A trail of bone-dry dirt is left behind him before the water returns. By the time he dispels the sheer kinetic knot that the crazy witch slammed into him, the night is already growing brighter and brighter. He looks down from the small hill that he was knocked onto the top of, looking down upon her latest attempt to kill him without concern. Each of the 13 components of Gem are working in flawless concert to build an enormous electrical charge that glows bright as a star. It casts her shadow up and into the clouds. The whole mess resembles gigantic serpents slithering across the sky. It also casts Franklin's shadow against the clouds as well. He flexes a touch of the axiom and starts a chain reaction to see how much attention she's paying. His shadow suddenly has glowing eyes high above, and to his disappointment, she does not react to the controlled ball lightning. The ball of power builds, and the mass of serpents in the sky seem to grow only more numerous as the figure stands impassively. Then the snakes are no more as the ball is launched right at Franklin. He doesn't move. He doesn't dodge or deflect or dissipate the energy. He grabs onto it and it expands further before he hefts it over his head. Then it unravels upwards and slams into the sky above, shattering the clouds and exposing a peaceful night under a beautiful corona of stars with the 2 small moons, one blue and one pale yellow, gleaming above like colored spotlights. "Care to try again?" Franklin asks in the shocked stillness. "What?" she demands as she struggles to keep her breath. That attack had taken almost all the local axiom. Her heads were all swimming and feeling utterly helpless. It is coming back. but slowly. "Would you care to try again? I've used the axiom down to the barest dregs. No more spells for at least a minute." She snarls up at him and he holds out his hand. From the clear sky above, a blast of lightning slams into his palm, and his fingers snap shut to trap it. He regards the dancing, twitching, nearly screaming bolt of lightning before letting it go back into the sky. "If you say so, but if you're that frail, I'll just finish this now," Franklin remarks as he starts walking down the hill, his every step drying the terrain around him as clouds of steam scream upwards from the sheer thermal abuse he's offering to his surroundings. His heat aura is still in effect. "You're mocking me. This whole time you've been playing with me, an insult all the way through." She spits at him from all 13 heads. "Of course I am, and the only reason I haven't been constantly talking is that I have no idea where to start. Is it your obvious stupidity, or the senility? Maybe the immaturity or lack of modesty? Perhaps how your technique is so damn sloppy? Or maybe that you're just plain ugly?" "Ugly?" she demands in a bellowing fury. "That's what sets her off?" Franklin asks himself as she charges forward, pulling hard at the slowly returning axiom. "I'll never understand women," he remarks coolly. The butler did it! He walks at a stately clip, his hand-cobbled shoes tapping on the ornate stone of the floor as he moves with great speed alongside the main buffet table, where he reaches over and grabs the vial of poison from the assassin, attempting to spike the punch. He pockets it quickly and continues on his way before transferring the serving tray to his other hand. It's a simple spread with merely some bourbon and shot glass alongside a few hors d'oeuvres. There are cheeses, of course, as well as a small charcuterie platter alongside some carpaccio and a few oysters with some samplings of olives and small pickles on toothpicks with a crusty loaf cut into small slices. Basic finger food to offset the sheer blandness of the buffet table. It had been rather interesting to learn that the locals have much more sensitive taste buds. It matched rather well with their utterly pathetic resistance to toxins. A patch of poison ivy would likely cause agony on a scale to have most contemplating suicide, rather than merely a few days or weeks of aggravation. He had also heard stories of peppers that were somewhere between jalapenos and habaneros actually killing alien women, or more likely shocking them hard enough to aggravate a pre-existing condition with fatal results. Purest pain on the tongue in an unexpected manner could cause an already frail heart, caused by a lifetime of indulgence and a lack of self-care, to seize or stop. "Rather unkind of you," he remarks as he confiscates a dagger that resembles a stiletto from a younger-looking member of the serving staff and quickly tucks it away. He homes in on Admiral Cistern, who's helping guide Ambassador Tal through a slow dance by allowing her to stand on his shoes. Rather kind of him, though that will mean that Philip will have to send someone to polish them again after this. They might be scuffed. A plasma pistol being withdrawn from yet another assassin's sleeve is confiscated with nary a word and vanishes within an interior pocket of his tailed coat, reminding the proper old man just how useful Axiom is, as normally he would be running rather short on space for equipment, both planned and confiscated on the field. As it is, the entire ensemble looks respectable, fits comfortably, and he can carry an entire armory's worth of equipment. Dr. Cuthins would have given his left arm and leg to have access to so effective a trick back in the olden days, the filthy southpaw cretin of a mad genius. He sniffs and dismisses the memory of fast cars, faster women, and the air thick with bullets and threats. Glory days they may have been, but no one had been more shocked than Philip himself when he reached retirement age. An activation device that, despite its alien construction, is clearly the ignition of a bomb is plucked from clumsy fingers and safely stored away as the gentle blues song dies down, and Admiral Cistern, seeing Philip approaching, has started to make his way to a side table with his date. Although it was rather amusing to think that formidable strategist and tactician was the technical arm candy in this exchange. The mental image of his commanding officer in a glittering red gown is snuffed out before it fully forms. "Good evening, sir. I do hope you're enjoying the celebrations," he says, walking up to the happy couple. "Might I add that you both, how is it said, cut a fine rug?" he asks, and Ambassador Tal just looks baffled as Admiral Cistern smirks. "I suppose we did," he remarks with a nod before glancing to his considerably shorter but very ripe green-skinned dance partner. It's slang for dancing, to dance so well you cut the rug. He explains to her, and she nods before looking up towards the platter that is no doubt towering from her perspective. "What have you brought?" she asks. "Just a few more human agreeable refreshments. While the locals have laid out a fine feast, it is rather bland and unappetizing to human tastes. Our heavy resistance to toxins means our sense of taste is rather dull by comparison, and while the repast available to all guests is healthy enough, merely healthy is not enough for an officer and a gentleman. Proper fare provides nourishment to body, mind, and soul," Philip explains. "Excellent, Sir Philip. You're a saint among sinners," Admiral Cistern says as Philip lowers the plate and presents the meal to him. A quick uncapping of the bourbon, and he fills the glass halfway up. "Oh, pish-posh, sir. I'm merely the butler," Philip counters. "What is all this?" Ambassador Tal asks, and Philip allows a thin smile to cross his face. "Alas, it is a simple repast. The drink is bourbon, a type of whiskey made from corn and fermented in a barrel of charred oak. It is known for its rich flavor and has at minimum 80 proofs, or 40% alcohol. From what I understand, the sampling I just poured Admiral Cistern would prove rather lethal to you, madam. My apologies. I am, however, willing to compensate by fetching any number of drinks or snacks you require. Perhaps later, though I am rather interested in what the rest of these are," she states, and doesn't notice that Admiral Cistern has noticed his little note under the glass and is reading it. "Of course, madam. These are cheeses, I'm aware of how cheeses are made, but not familiar with these types. Merely some cheddar, mozzarella, Havarti, and Gouda? Unfortunately, we're rather cut off from more proper cheeses," Sir Philip explains as he wrinkles his nose in distaste. "It's fine, Sir Philip," Admiral Cistern tries to assure him. His waving of his left hand with the note held against his downwards palm with his thumb indicates he's read and memorized the contents of the quick report. "It most certainly is not," Philip nearly hisses as he grabs Admiral Cistern's hand to place the bourbon glass in it. He also takes the time to vanish the point form report. "A man of your station deserves to have a finer repast than simple cheddar. You represent an entire world. You shouldn't be—" He visibly takes a moment to get control of himself and notices that Admiral Cistern sips the bourbon with 2 fingers extended, the smallest and ring. Option 2 it is then. "My apologies, sir, to you as well, Ambassador Tal. It was unbecoming of me." "No apologies needed, Sir Philip. This trip has been stressful in numerous ways to each and every one of us." "Indeed, sir. Now, Madam Tal, to the rest of the platter we have a carpaccio, thinly sliced raw meats, in this case beef sirloin with lemon, olive oil, salt, and pepper for seasoning. Where these here are half-shelled oysters, a form of shellfish, as you can plainly see. This here is a charcuterie, a variety of smoked meats accompanied by several fine mustards, a type of potent sauce with a variety of uses. These here are olives, a form of small fruit that is a staple in a wide variety of diets. Next to them are pickles, a type of preserved vegetable rendered delightfully sour by the process. And the last bit is some bread as a cleanser. Why is it that this one platter looks better than the entire buffet table?" Ambassador Tal asks him, hands on her hips and a smile on her face. "We have excellent chefs in competition for whom is the most competent amongst their number," Philip answers, and she giggles. "Perhaps this would serve you, madam. I apologize that it isn't suitably gilded and will stand out among our surroundings, however it will prove most useful," he says, drawing a small bioscanner out from a pocket in his tailcoat and presents it to her. "It's already keyed to your species, madam," he says, and she offers him a toothy smile. The lips of the gobe stretch wide enough to be disturbing. He glances away from the ambassador, who's now unknowingly stepped into the uncanny valley. "Is something wrong?" Admiral Cistern asks. "No, sir, but perhaps I should fetch the lady a drink as she examines the fare," Philip offers. "Oh my goodness, the bourbon is that toxic?" she asks in shock. "I'll leave you to it. Do you have any preference of drink, milady?" Philip asks, and she simply stares in fascination at the readout. Admiral Cistern gives a slight nod, and he walks off smartly to retrieve the lady a drink. Also to disarm a young serving girl with a dart gun, another who has what appears to be an automated launcher in her groomed head feathers. He steals a vial of poison and casually takes away a recording device that was painfully obvious off the bottom of the table. He fills up a crystal wine glass halfway, places it upon a tray, and walks smartly back to his admiral. He also takes another detonator from another wanton anarchist and rolls his eyes in sheer disappointment. These children truly define the term incompetent. No doubt not a single one of them has ever been in a high-stakes shootout for the codes to a weapon of mass destruction, using only a pistol in one hand while attempting to properly captain a speedboat with the other. He tries to imagine some of these would be assassins and agents in the situations he had found himself in, and the only result running through his mind is a wet smear or a cooling corpse. In all likelihood, he'd have to work extra hard to ensure that both Herbert and Harriet are good and ready for when he heads back home. He shoots his hand out and grabs young Distortion by a protruding flap that helps protect his ear canal and drags the incompetent little spy with him. "I see you've found our friend again, Philip," Admiral Cistern remarks, and Ambassador Tal looks up from her study of the Dijon mustard. "Your drink, madam, I do hope it is a preferred type," he says, holding out the tray to Ambassador Tal, who takes it with a thankfully closed-mouth smile. Then she looks to where his left hand is holding onto Mr. Ortion's ear flap. "Is that Mr. Ortion again?" she asks in a somewhat strained tone of voice. "I believe so, yes," Philip replies. "How are you two doing that?" she asks in complete puzzlement. "That's what I'd like to know," Distortion says. "Hush, this is the time for adults, young man. Until you can perform the duties you are paid to do without consistently failing, you will never grow into yourself." Philip replies with a sniff. "I'm 26, the cloaken man snarls, "and I am rapidly approaching 80. You are a hatchling boy. It's not the years, it's the mileage, you old—" The upset young cloaken begins and receives a painful shake. "Then I'm approaching my 1000th century. You would do well to listen to your elders." "I did. I'm not standing on a carpet. Let me go for pity's sake." He protests, and Philip complies. "Very well, then. Here is another pearl of wisdom, young man. Some people pay an enormous amount of attention to their surroundings. These are usually spies of some sort, or those who believe themselves to be targeted by spies. These people are prone to notice unusual things even if they cannot physically see them. This is especially true to those with the slightest amount of axiom training. You're both adepts. Yes and no. I'm not going to clarify, but for love of queen and country, act as if your invisibility does not work. It will help you enormously. Pretend you are visible and reassess your strategies. You've relied so much upon this crutch that—" Philip stops himself from mentioning the brat's cologne. He takes a breath, gets an unfortunate whiff of the mess, and then makes a shooing gesture. The boy all but sprints off and barely dodges a party guest. "So aside from the clowns mocking your skills, are you enjoying the day?" Admiral Cistern asks. "Indeed, sir. I've made a very close friend by merely explaining the purposes of a sensory deprivation pod. They're quite the chatty type, but they know a great many interesting things about a great many people." He then leans in. "Especially our dear Speaker of the Council," he says in a conspiratorial voice. He then watches as the gears behind Ambassador Tal's eyes churn at lightning speed before her eyebrows go up, and she then quickly steals her expression. Not bad. A bit of training and she'd make an acceptable spy in just a few months. No more than a year at any rate.